Welcome, everyone, to introduce our moderator for this session. I think you've already met. This is Lauren Bright, and she is the founder and principal consultant for Torus. Lauren?
Hi there, everyone. My name is Lauren Bright, once again, and I'm the host for your session today, where we are going to dive further into the innovation that's happening around the next generation materials space. So I come to you with over a decade of experience in advanced product creation and innovation across the footwear, apparel, and automotive industries, actually. And my consultancy, which is called Torus, really focuses on leading radical collective action projects on behalf of the industry with a more biologically centered view of sustainability and circularity. So with respect to today's topic, we'll be discussing the current state of the industry. You will have the good fortune of meeting some of the leaders in this space and learning more from their experience, as well as understanding what they see to be the white spaces that are still ripe for innovation and where the industry is heading in the future. So with that in mind, I would like to introduce our first panelist, Christine Goulay, who is the Global Director of Pangaia Science, which is the B2B material science arm associated with the brand Pangaia. So Christine, we'd love to hear more about Pangaia Science's mission and your role in the advancement of next generation materials, both now and in a historical capacity, which led you up to this point in your career.
Okay, well, thank you. And thanks to the Material Innovation Initiative for having us here today. I've really enjoyed the session so far, and you just put together a really great conference. So thank you very much. So as Lauren mentioned, I am working at Pangaia. Pangaia is a material science company, and we really focus on the material science company part. There is a brand that you might know, a direct-to-consumer brand. I'm actually wearing one of the shirts now, and the hallmark of the brand is having these text blocks, which really transparently say what the composition of the product is. So that's a way of being able to tell the story to the consumer, but also bring to light the material science innovations, which is really at the heart of Pangaia. And it was really founded with this mission to be Earth positive. And for Pangaia, that means that whatever we put out, we really want it to be better for the planet than if it didn't exist. So we go through a very rigorous analysis every time we have a new concept in place for a technology that we want to research or develop. I am actually on the B2B side of the business. And traditionally, if you're in fashion, B2B can mean, selling into a department store and a wholesale sort of relationship. But for Pangaia, what we mean by B2B is really trying to provide a turnkey a solution for brands and for suppliers to be able to adopt a lot of the technologies that we've identified and worked with. And we think this is one of the quickest ways that we can work to accelerate to a more Earth positive future by putting together a lot of the pieces of the puzzle that we think will help in increasing that ability to adopt, because we all know there are a lot of challenges when you're trying to innovate. And as much as we can, we're trying to open source like everything that we've learned. So it's quite exciting. And let me just tell you a little more about how the model works, because I think that's one of the most, not only are we working with innovations, but I actually think the business model is quite innovative. Because within Pangaia, since there's this real laser focus on material sciences, we have an R&D team of almost 20 people internally. And their expertise is incredible. You have people who are at Lululemon or Adidas or Speedo or Marks and Spencer or Burberry. So a really vast view across segments, but also across materials and technologies. And they work hand in hand also with our impact team. And together we've identified certain research pillars that guide the way that we approach our innovation process. So these are pillars such as diverting the industry away from conventional cotton, diverting the industry away from fossil fuel-based materials, et cetera. And with the impact team, once we are creating a technology or working with a partner, our impact team works with a third party to help do LCAs so that we can really have that data and be able to measure and have that insight into the impacts across the value chain, because we feel that that's really quite important. And we also have amazing supply chain partners. I'll be talking more about them during the session, but we partner with Grado Zero. So we have Pangaia Grado Zero in Italy, who are the creators of our amazing flower down technology, which we're going to dive into a bit more later, as well as in Portugal, RDD Textiles, which is a fabric mill and dye house. So within our portfolio of innovations for Pangaia Science B2B, we have our flower down, we have our array of fabrics containing things like seaweed or agri-waste like pineapple leaf or banana leaf, as well as dyes and treatments that we're using. But the flower down is going to be the focus of this session. So that's our insulation that's 100% animal-free, 100% natural, petroleum-free, which is made from wildflowers and a biopolymer called PLA, and then treated with a bio-based aerogel for thermal properties. So maybe I'll leave it there because that's already a lot. And I know all of the panelists are going to introduce themselves too. And then we can go into more depth after on the flower down as we get into the discussion.
Great. Thank you, Christine. Super interesting. So really excited to dive in further. Next, we have Julian Ellis-Brown, who is the co-founder and CEO of SaltyCo, another materials science company that also makes planet-positive textiles. So Julian, tell us a little bit more about your background as what seems like truly a jack of all trades when it comes to the essential functional roles that facilitate the product creation process, as well as SaltyCo's vision for the future and your decision-making process that leads to action, not only in materials development, but in new and novel supply chains as well.
Thanks, Lauren. Great to be here. And yeah, amazing conference. I mean, I personally also use the Material Innovation Initiative, like white papers all the time as well. It's like a sort of like almost a book on my desk, which I'm constantly flicking through for new resources and things. So it's a real privilege. And also, I think it's really interesting to have on this panel as well, going from Christine at Pangaia, who's obviously an incredible brand and material science company, which is huge. And then I think we're probably offering quite the other end of the spectrum with our, like, you know, we're early stage startup. We're still a really small team of under 10 people. And yeah, but I'd love to tell you a little bit more about what we do as well. So I'm just gonna bring this up quickly. So SaltyCo makes what we call planet positive textiles. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of positive themes throughout this in what we do, but you know, hopefully we'll be able to explain some of the differences as well. But SaltyCo makes planet positive textiles from plants that heal damaged land, and damaged land is a real focus for us, and looking at land, how we've treated it, and how we might be able to restore and rehabilitate it whilst also making great products. So our first product is another goose down alternative. It's called BioPuff, and it's a plant-based fiber fill for use as an alternative to goose down or synthetic fillers. And it's also lightweight, incredibly warm, and of course nice and puffy. And filling your jacket with BioPuff would be the equivalent of about 30 geese worth of material, or potentially reducing the plastic content of a jacket by up to 70%. But to make BioPuff, what we do is we work with farmers who need to heal areas of their land, but are often worried about loss of income if they can't use their land for conventional farming. There's a big push for regenerative agriculture, for restoring land, from governments and conservation groups, but often, you know, many people rely on this land as well. But what we can do at SaltyCo is connect plants grown in these spaces using regenerative agriculture to the fashion industry through our sort of proprietary fiber extraction technology that we've been working on in our material processing. And this allows us to create BioPuff while simultaneously improving biodiversity, capturing carbon, and saving on resources. And to give a little bit more detail about the types of plants we work with, we're specifically interested and really passionate about peatlands. And peatlands are these type of wetland marsh, and they're actually one of the most precious ecosystems on Earth, despite the fact that as a global society, we don't tend to talk about them that much. So despite only covering 3% of the world's surface, they hold more than twice the carbon than all the other forests in the world combined. But sadly, due to mismanagement of peatlands for farming or other uses, Europe is now the second largest emitter of peatland greenhouse gases, and these precious environments are now being threatened to extinction. However, if we re-wetted and regenerated just 3% of these, we could reduce overall European agricultural emissions by 25%, whilst using 40 times less land than equivalent goose down production. So that's a bit about sort of what we do and why we do it. And yeah, I look forward to getting into a little bit more discussion with everyone else a little bit later on, where perhaps I can give more detail if there's any questions.
Super interesting. I definitely want to come back to the topic of regenerative agriculture and what that means within your organization, how you guys are defining it, but also within the context of specific bioregions. I think that's a really interesting thing to bring into this conversation. So the next panelist that we have is Jeroen, the co-founder and CEO of Flocus, which is a material science company that's identified a seed hair fiber from the kapok tree that can be utilized as a down alternative. So Jeroen, how about you tell us a little bit more about your background and the journey from technical textiles to CEO and how Flocus came to be?
Yes, well done with the name, Lauren. So
Thank you.
a little bit more about my background. So yeah, I'm a textile engineer, and I spent most of my working life in Asia. So countries like Bangladesh and China, and this is where I really got into supply chains from clothing production to different type of textiles. That's also where I counted the kapok fiber, and then that's where our story and today's presentation will be also about is on educating and sharing more information of what kapok does, and again sharing some visuals will help the understanding. Is that in this case we talk really about a simple tree, like any tree, just quite a large tree, and it provides a non-food crop as in a pod, and inside the pod you have fibers. So there is no need for processing. We just crack the pod and machine clean, and there we go. So being a tree, it really starts very different than to most other raw materials, and it has a lot of regenerative properties where it really improves the environment. So, and it is additionally interesting for polycropping, where farmers can put multiple crops in between the trees and make an extra income per square meter. Again, it's quite a big tree, so it also stores a lot of carbon. It's not a tree which get cut like a lot of other trees get done for textiles. And this tree can provide fruits for 70 or 100 years to a farmer, so it's quite a stable method, and there's not a lot of work to it. The tree grows by itself, and it stores really a massive amount of carbon. And that also makes sure that you have a fiber which starts with a carbon offset. And that's, of course, quite interesting in this topic, and also for the environment is very important. So as it's a plant-based, it's grown organic by default. It only needs natural resources. Like with Julian, we have a regenerative agroforestry approach, and for us we are reshaping the supply chain by really stepping in there and improving the sorting, but also areas in the supply chain itself. Now on the properties I won't go in too much detail, but we will do that soon with the down request. I think it's important for this to close my introduction is our concept and impact. Is that Flocus is a trademark for kapok fibers. We started to work with the fiber in different type of textiles, so yarns, fabrics, and non-wovens, which can be placed down. and that goes into different type of products. Then additionally, we have set up a foundation which then also has a nursery to do planting services, and together with our customers we plant new kapok trees for future scaling, and we do a lot more research, and then the circle starts growing of higher demand creates more trees, and this brings more trees into the world. So that's it for now, and I'm looking forward to engage with the crew in this group.
Thanks so much. Love the conversation around new business models and bringing more plants into the world. So our last panelist is Nicolas Bargi. I'm totally butchering it. Okay, feel free to correct me on that. Who is the CEO of Save the Duck, an Italian family-owned brand and B Corp dedicated to 100% animal-free and high-performance products. So Nicolas, tell us a little bit about your journey from an economics background, it seems, to the founding of Save the Duck, and why your brand's position on animal welfare became a pillar of your identity and technical innovation focus.
So, ciao to everyone. Thank you very much for inviting us. I'm actually substituting my ESG manager, which is much more technical than me, but I will be happy to try to explain a little bit about our company. So my background is a little bit similar to Jeroen, because I come from production. I've actually traveled all around the world, so Bangladesh, Vietnam, Myanmar, China especially, already in the 90s. After a 10-year experience in production, I saw a lot of things, not so many nice things to see, and this hit me strong. And when I relaunched the company of my father, I wanted to relaunch a project based on the fact that I wanted to reorganize many of the things that I saw in production that were not okay. We are not a first mover. We are just adapting in fashion what outdoor already was doing. I mean, Patagonia is doing this since 30 years. And they are really the Rolls Royce of sustainability. But it is strange, but fashion didn't care about all these things. So it was about caring about people, the workers, about chemicals, about energy, how do you produce, about how do you impact in nature. So so Save the Duck came in. As the word says, it's nothing related to feathers. We don't use anything coming originally from an animal. This is our status, and we have agreements with all the most important associations in the world, like WWF, Wild Aid, PETA, and so on. We have been awarded for this. So this is really the type of DNA we have. Of course, from day 2, it was not like we're saving animals, but we're polluting the world. So the question in 2011, when I launched the brand, was how do I define a product as an eco product? And there was really not an answer, and people didn't care in those years too much about this theme. So it was, starting from the basics, so about manufacturing. We went into factories. We changed and asked for certification about the workers. We chose certain factories with whom we would improve each by year the process. And then it was about the chemicals, RSL, and then it was about how the manufacturing system impacts by choosing certain type of manufacturing and certain type of materials from the beginning. And little by little, 2018 came. And 2018, I said, okay, I would really like to know where we are now. So for me, to ask for the certification of B Corp was like, okay, we're going in a due diligence, 6 months due diligence for all the themes, and we're going to see if we are ready and we are a good company, And so we entered. We were the first Italian fashion B Corp. So very proud of this. It's incredible because you can imagine in fashion manufacturers and the companies and the brands there are, and to be the first one in the system, we were really surprised. We entered also with a very high note because we had 95. 80 is where you get in, and then from there we applied all the rules, and each year we We try to implement our system. It's a 360 degrees. We don't only touch and talk about materials, we talk about all the themes that sustainability is about, the ESG system. So it's a lot of work, and we try to impact and influence all that is around the company, so especially the manufacturing, because the manufacturing system is the 98% of the impact of the whole company, so it's the most important, but also our customers and logistics, everything. And this is about the big core system. It's like influencing positively the whole system and asking every year to have a higher level to gain. And there is not a level that is an extreme level. You can always improve, you can always do more. And we really strive to do all this. From the other side, in a very transparent way, we have to talk about consumers. Are the consumers ready for all this excellence of sustainability? Yes and no. So the other big point is how you educate consumers to understand the difference of the product. How do you educate consumers to buy a garment in a responsible way, and not a garment that you will buy and then use 2 times and put it in your wardrobe? How do you educate consumers to make choices and understand what is behind the process? Well, in a very transparent way. We are far away from being a perfect company. We improve every year, but we do it in a transparent way. If you go in our website or you see our sustainability report, everything is written there. And there is also the goals we want to achieve in the next 3 years. And when we achieve them, we say we achieve them. When we don't achieve them, we explain why we don't just achieve them and when we will achieve them. So more than this, with entering the big core system, what we did, and one of the most important goals, which is about sustainability, is net zero discharge within 2020. Each company, each big corp is engaged to be, CO2 neutral by 2030. Well, our choice was yes, the commitment, because the most important thing is to reduce CO2 emissions, but at the same time to compensate immediately everything we were producing. So for the year 2021, we are carbon neutral, which doesn't mean, again, we are perfect. We're far away from being perfect, but at least we compensate the damage we do by producing. And each year we reduce and we compensate, and we reduce and we compensate. And the idea is to become, when you produce, you impact. It's impossible not to impact. So the idea is, how do I impact better in a better way to not ruin the nature, the planet, and so on, and how do I reinsert these products with a circular economy inside the system, because it's about reusing, and impacting always less. And this is a study case for us, at least in university. We go to university, we study with the best practices and suppliers of the world, and we do that constantly, but we don't have a solution yet for that.
Yeah, great point, Nicolas. Great point. And thank you for more of the understanding of the systems approach that you guys are taking. I think that's a really interesting viewpoint. I think our industry has done a really good job at siloed solutions. So it's great to see that you guys are taking more of this systems viewpoint. And I love how honest you've been about how being a change maker is difficult. And I'm hoping that we can get more into that conversation as we continue our discussion today. So thank you all for your introductions. We are so honored as a representative of the Material Innovation Initiative. I don't think I mentioned this earlier, but I also advise for the organization. We are honored to have you all here on our panel. So moving into questions, this first question, I think I'd initially like to direct to Christine, because I think you sit in a really interesting spot. Obviously, there's, a brand that you are, making materials in honor of. I suppose they get to utilize those materials. But as you mentioned, right now, the focus of this conversation is around one material innovation, but you guys actually have a lot more material innovations that are coming out of your company. So I think it's important to note that the industry in general currently utilizes a large number of fairly degenerative materials across the board. So how did down alternatives bubble to the top of the priority list of materials to tackle? And how was this identified as a critical need for the industry? And do you have any fun origin stories or aha moments associated with the development of this material?
Yeah, great question. So I joined Pangaia about a year ago. So I'm relatively new, so was not there for the origin story, but have heard a lot about it. And we have amazing partners in Italy who I mentioned, Pangaia Grado Zero, and they're scientists who developed the technology of flower down many years ago, over 10 years ago. So Grado Zero was working with NASA. They were trying to find ways where they could use natural fibers and increase performance with the best technologies that exist. And that's really what the ethos of Pangaia is. We could say high-tech naturalism, like nature is the best inventor, and how do we use what we can see today in the best technologies to be able to fuse the high-tech with nature and create the performance that we need. So Grado Zero worked with, as I mentioned, NASA, European Space Agency, with people traveling to the poles, really who needed performance, who needed a material that would keep them really warm and be able to deliver. And so the flower down material was something that in their labs over time, they were able to develop. And with this aerogel, it's a patented solution. I can actually show a couple slides because I didn't do that before, but I know that can be quite helpful. Let me just bring them up. You can tell me if you see them. Can you see it? No?
Yeah, we can see that.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so we realized that on the market, there are a lot of synthetic alternatives and there are a lot of animal-based alternatives. And as I was saying, we have these pillars that guide our R&D at Pangaia, one of which is to move the industry away from traditional animal-derived products, like to really look at ways to produce in a different way. And so when the founders of Pangaia were connected and found Grado Zero, it really just seemed like a perfect match to take this hero technology out to the market and show how incredible it is. So as I mentioned, it's made from wildflowers. So these are flowers, we already had the conversation, regenerative has come up. These are flowers that are, not cultivated. So there are no pesticides, there's no irrigation. They grow in prairies. They're there kind of, even by the side of the road sometimes. And they're very, very important plants for pollinator species, actually, which eat the leaves. And so in some ways, they actually help the livelihoods and the biodiversity in areas where they grow because they do provide a food source to a lot of these pollinator species. So when they're harvested, we can take, and nature is incredible because all parts of this plant could be used for something wonderful, but the pod and inside the pod, we have a flower floss that's used and it's blended with, as I mentioned, with a biopolymer called polylactic acid, which is made from post-industrial biological waste, as you can see here. And then the aerogel is applied, which is this patented technology. This is a paper-based aerogel. So all the components are actually biodegradable and, as mentioned, 100% natural and 100% animal free. So you can kind of see the steps here of how the process works. So where you mix the wildflowers with the biopolymer, you infuse the aerogel, and this is all done at our facilities in Italy, and then you can fill your jacket. So we have a few different qualities now. We have, as you see in the puffer, the original, we have a lighter version, and we've developed with a wonderful partner in Italy called Imbotex, a non-woven padding. And we have different weights going from 100 grams per linear meter up to, we're testing up beyond 500 grams per linear meter. It could be used for different markets like home, as well as for fashion. So that maybe gives a little better insight into what the flower down is. I think there's a great response from the market because over the last several years, 5 years or so, you can really see that companies are searching for solutions. Brands are searching for solutions So many brands have made these very ambitious targets, their sustainability targets. And if they want to reach the sustainability targets, you have to tackle the raw material. I previously worked at the Caring Group, where the environmental profit and loss, or EP&L, showed that 70% of the impacts were at that raw material stage, that tier 4 sourcing level. So if you want to have a lot of impact in your action, it is by tackling this part of the supply chain. And there's another interesting report that's come out by the Apparel Impact Institute and Fashion for Good on how we're going to get to net zero. And it shows that in order to get there, we need innovation. Like 39% of the effort will have to come from new technologies, or we won't get there. So you really feel that people are looking for solutions, brands are looking for solutions. So I think it's quite an exciting time to really be looking at these next gen materials and bringing them forward.
Just to jump on that point there as well, I think another reason why things like goose down, although perhaps not the most immediately obvious sort of like sustainable next gen material to make, I think there's a bit of a common misconception around materials like leather and goose down and other animal derived materials, that they're kind of byproducts of industries that are essentially a waste stream that we no longer need, whereas in fact they're co-products of these industries. And if the entire goose down industry was wiped out, it wouldn't mean the rest. It props up the rest of these damaging industries as well, the same as leather does. And so I think that's an important distinction to make when sort of understanding why it's so important that we address concerns like these.
That's a
So
great
I think to add to this point, there is down is not opposed to the fiber market, not a very big player, right? I think it's even less than 1% of all the fibers. So I think there is also even in the current market there is a shortage of down. So I think there is actually a need for more good type of down materials without it deriving from animals. And I don't think people will stop eating meat anyway, so there will always be a down available, which is a pity if we would waste it, right? But to the other point, yes, new installations are necessary because most of the installations are still synthetic based. And 100% biodegradable would be the ultimate part, and that's actually, I think, where we are coming from. That kapok is a fiber which is available. It gives you the performance. We haven't done anything to change the fiber. It gives the performance like down. It's not even freezing at minus 262, which is only wood does that besides kapok. But the other interesting part is that it provides an offset. And what we see as a challenge in down is in industries like car industry, the NASA, or construction, they always want to go thinner and lighter. But with most of the apparel industry, they keep pushing for puffy, puffy, puffy. And that's where kapok cannot feed that part because it's a short fiber. And I wonder, how come the fashion industry wants to keep the puffy part if there are solutions like kapok which are thin, as warm or even warmer, and better on thermoregulation? And that's maybe a question for the brands. Why is the puffy effect such an important part where all the other industries want thinner and lighter?
Well,
maybe I can reply a little bit to Jeroen. Unfortunately, we cannot control trends. So sometimes it's like the trends is a thin, and like the Uniqlo jacket, which was a super, still a lot of people continue to buy, and then there is the big puffy jacket because that is the trend. I also have experimented kapok on my garments. I do agree with all what you said. We actually, again, are not honestly speaking, we are not virgin. We started off with PET because actually our plume tick is a virgin PET, which we put. It has all the process of blue signing, RSL, everything, but it's PET, virgin PET. And then That was the first year, and then at the end of the second year, so we started off with recycled PT, so it's recycled plume tech, and that was our second technology. Today, more than 50% of our garments are recycled. Totally recycled means not only the plume tech, but also the outside, the zipper, blah, 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 blah. And then the third was, okay, we go for nylon 6. That is the most advanced technology in synthetic, because that is reusable, as you know very well. And you go in circular economy, because that kind of material you can reuse with much lower impact than normal recycling, and without putting other things inside. And the last one, which is for sure the most interesting, is the bio. And the bio today, up to what I know, is still has certain limits in terms of weights, in terms of puffiness, as you say, to make I mean, the puffiness that down gives, the real down gives, is not acquired by any synthetic or any bio-based still, because the 800 power field that down gives cannot be achieved by any other synthetic or bio-based padding. So we have to continue to work on this, and we have to achieve a lighter garment with a heavy weight protecting. I think that in general there is not one direction. It's a question of creating conscious alternatives to real down. Real down they will continue to use. Maybe it will become less. For sure it will become less. So all of us, we have to work to create alternatives, and then we have to actually educate the final consumer to actually maybe choose the alternative that is more close to the psychological profile of the consumer. No? It can be a company like mine using nothing from animal. It can be the synthetic recycling. It can be things coming from the ocean. We have a technology that is recycling nets. So someone that really cares about the ocean, recycling the plastic coming from the ocean, which is something, again, difficult to do, because plastic can be recycled only when it's really perfect. It cannot be recycled when it's damaged, because it creates too much impact again. So it's the
Nicolas,
intelligent recycling.
Yeah, this is a great point. I actually think this leads to our next question, which we only have 7 minutes left for the actual panel portion of this. So I love that all of you guys got into answering that, and I actually think you addressed a lot of things that we want to cover anyway throughout the course of this conversation. But I do think kind of the conversation that we're having right now is pushing us towards the question of weighing trade-offs. So biogenic materials versus anthropogenic materials. And given the trends that we've seen in the market towards bio-based, biodegradable, and biocompatible materials, how do you guys, as material innovators or brands, evaluate the production impacts and end-of-life potential of next-generation alternatives versus their natural down predecessors? Do you undergo life cycle analyses like exercises? And what is really your guiding light or North Star as you approach alternative materials, particularly in the biodegradation space where, this is just from my own personal experience, but biodegradation is really a material property and is also only compatible in certain environmental conditions. So with that in mind, do you think that there are enough industrial and or natural conditions available to actually biodegrade these materials as they've been designed? Or what do you see as kind of the future potential for the materials as you're designing into them today? And feel free, anybody can take that. We'll start with Julian. Yes, mic's on. Perfect.
I think with all of our materials and innovations which we have here, I think one of the biggest problems we'll face from a fashion perspective is end of life of the garments, due to the fact that even if our materials are completely biodegradable and we put them through the LCAs, at the end of their life, they're going to be enclosed more likely than not in a polyester nylon outer shell, and which isn't very helpful even in the event that our materials are completely biodegradable. So I think one of the challenges and one of the most interesting sort of, white spaces and sort of new industries to explore is how we look at end of life. Also how we look more at like circular fashion models, looking at reselling and making sure that we extend the lives of our garments, because taking apart a coat, which is, full of jacket end of life, is not particularly easy, and sometimes not the most economical thing to do either. It's great to see other cases like redown and things like that, where you get this, where you are starting to have a completely circular model. But yeah, and perhaps I'll leave others to talk a little bit more about
Julian, I totally agree with you. It's about, I think, exercising to innovate, giving alternatives. I don't think there is a best alternative. I think each alternative have the plus and minus for different reasons, because they impact. So, for example, bio impacts on the consumption of water, the synthetic less. The bio, of course, after the biodegradables easily, the synthetic is forever. So it's about maintenance, but the synthetic, actually, if you make a simple garment, it will maintain against the down jacket forever. It means it's nearly undestroyable. So it's about using one jacket for 10 years, not because, of course, we want to change the jacket. So there's not an answer. So we have to really strive to exercise different type of innovations. And the end of the course is, how do I put this back and you reuse this? So it's, I know that Patagonia have made they took back the jackets, they opened it up, and then they reinserted these prime materials in production. How much does all this impact? Getting it back, having it separate, and getting it in production again is huge, and the cost, because in the end it's about trade between what Lauren said. The final consumer wants to pay all this, yes or no? Is interested about this, yes or no? So I think in the balance of the solution is in the balance. So it's about different initiative, and we still have to do a lot on this, and to work on what will happen to the end of the product. It's second-hand. It is for a second lower end customer, because that does not impact in the end. If you don't destroy the garment and reuse it, and you give it a second life normally. We have a blog, for example, where we say, if you have a jacket with a good condition, you can sell it discounted, or you can actually give it to a second person which cannot achieve it. And like this, you impact positively, because you don't sell another garment and you don't produce another garment, which is the best thing you can do sustainably wise.
Yeah, thanks, Nicolas. So we only have time for one more question. So I'm going to go ahead. I think Jeroen and Christine, I'm going to leave this one to you guys. What do you guys see as budding trends in this particular material category? And what are some of the challenges and barriers that you might expect to overcome within the next few years, in particular with this space? And do you see any more white spaces for innovation to happen?
Okay, I'll go first, Jeroen. So, I think the move toward, a natural product and an animal-free product is definitely one where there's a lot of market demand, I would say, for the installations. As Jeroen was mentioning, sometimes there are limitations or differences in a natural fiber, plant-based fiber. Julian's nodding too. That would be different from a regular goose down, for example. So there's still a lot of opportunity in working with design teams or supply chain partners or others to talk about how the materials are different and how they are better in some ways and would behave differently and give different results. But I also think, with R&D and as we progress, you can get closer and closer all the time to what a traditional goose down would be in terms of performance. And I'm sure everybody is working on that. So because it's always easier to implement an innovation when you're using the same testing standards, etc. So even though it might not make sense to test a cellulosic like an animal feather, if that's what brands are doing, then you really have to kind of try your best to make sure that your material is testing in the same way. I do quickly want to say, though, actually, because we talked about with the LCA question, because that's something that I think is really important for all of these innovations, is to really analyze the data so that as we are doing the R&D process and optimizing, that we're really sure where in the value chain we are confident that the material is better, or where we need to make improvements as well. And I think, with innovation, it's hard to collect all this impact data before we're scaled, and the fashion industry has been slow on collecting data in general. So I really also recommend that people continue to be very rigorous about the data collection, which is something that I mentioned has been important to Pangaia and working with Green Story in our case to do that LCA analysis. But just wanted to comment on that last question.
I think there's a lot of space for actually education and understanding, like in this discussion coming from design, which is a very important part, where actually a lot of the products actually start, but if the designer doesn't fully understand what are the possibilities or the limitations, then it already starts to become quite complicated. We started off with a fiber which was already functioning between 1819 in airplanes and refrigerated trucks, and it was reused after 10 years even if those materials, because it was not degraded. Then polyester came along and it was cheaper and it kicked out, let's say, kapok, and it became forgotten. So it is a part of education where, especially from our end, where the fiber has a positive impact, meaning end of life is very different. That biodegrading is actually okay, because using more of something what is carbon offset has only a better impact on the world. So it's a very different on the end of life. So as I said before, is that we believe there is certain conservative approaches by some brands, and I love the smaller brands, and there are, now Pangaia is one of them, but there are quite a few other them. They can be more flexible with trying out new stuff. And this is what is really helping those new innovations to get to a next step. The bigger companies are more reserved. They cannot, let's say, take that step. They are too scared for something what might go wrong and impact on their sales. Whereas the smaller brands, they are more entrepreneurial, and they say, hey, we need to do this for this and this reason, and let's do it together. And that's the approach, I think, which would help a lot. And like these sessions, it's education, sharing the experiences, and at some point I would say, why not try? We have to. We have no choice, right? The time is running. So yeah, I guess that's my point to add to this.
Yeah, that's a great point, Jeroen. I think there's a lot to learn from these different types of innovation models and what has and has not worked historically. I can say, just speaking from my own experience, being in really large brands for over a decade, there's definitely a barrier to adoption when it comes to working with material innovators and wanting to see a proof of concept before that proof of concept is available, before you commit your brand to being dedicated to off-taking that material. And at the same time, the material innovators need to have that sort of dedication to get venture capital funding to make it possible. So I just wanted to note that this is a really interesting place that the Material Innovation Initiative in general actually exists to sort of facilitate those connections between innovators, brands, venture capitalists, machine manufacturers, etc., to really build out the ecosystem to make this type of work possible. So, cheers to them for putting on this event. I think it's really a cool space that they live in. So we have about 10 minutes left for questions. I do not see a ton of questions. However, there were some that are specific to different companies that I'm just going to throw in there really quickly. So when it comes to Flocus, there was a question about your actual pathway to commercialization and capacity. So what does that look like? What capacity are you at right now? What does that look like as you continue to expand your operation?
So kapok trees go around the equator. We predominantly focus on Indonesia because that's where actually 100 years ago there was a supply chain of fibers. So currently there is yearly about 20 million kilo of fibers available. It's by far not enough if we're going to replace, let's say, 1 or 2% of polyester and cotton. So this is also why we set up the foundation, because currently there is enough, but within a few years and seeing where the fiber is available, we have to start planting a lot of trees. And this is, to me, the opportunity, because this is what the world wants to start planting a lot of trees. Then why not textile trees for textiles, right? Which then gives a carbon offset as a regenerative agriculture, and then provides the fiber for those companies which are using it. And so for us, scaling starts by planting more trees. And that you can do. It's not, of course, as fast as pressing a button, but these trees grow pretty fast. So it's more about land availability, nurseries. So I'm becoming partially an agricultural person as a textile engineer. But yeah, for us, that is the exciting part. We have to start planting a lot of more trees.
You're on mute, Lauren.
Sorry. Classic. Okay. Christine, I don't know if you could see that I was saying your name, but
No.
I think the only other audience question that we have left is, does Pangaia have designated fields for wildflowers, and how is that harvesting done? And then I'm going to add to that, based off of my own experience in regenerative agriculture. How do you predict quality harvest over harvest? And maybe that's something that's more for the technical teams, but I've noticed in working in regenerative cotton, you don't know what you have until the land gives that to you.
Yeah.
And that can present definite technical challenges when it comes to delivering a consistent quality product over time. And I'd love to hear how you guys sort of remediate that or balance that out within your product assortment.
Yeah. Okay. So as I mentioned, the flowers we use aren't cultivated, so it's not like you're going to have a farm with a bunch of these flowers and you're going to harvest them at a certain time of year. So it's much more something that's kind of collected. And with one of the suppliers that we use, there's actually an NGO that works with communities to help do the collection, and they teach about biodiversity while they're doing the collection. So it's a very, I love the story because it's so holistic in the way that it's done, and focusing on the social side as well as the biodiversity side by working with these communities. But what we do is we also don't want to rely, one of the issues that we've seen with fashion is sort of the over-reliance on certain crops, cotton being one of them. And so one thing we try to do at Pangaia is diversify the fiber basket. So taking, how can we use nettle? How can we use hemp? I mentioned pineapple leaf or banana leaf or bamboo and eucalyptus, all these different sources which grow faster, which are more renewable. So even in the way that we use the flower down, we try to use the same principle and source different types of flowers and have a flower mix that we can use. So that also helps protect us a bit. It's like diversifying your investment portfolio in a way, so that if we're using different types of flowers, if for one reason a certain harvest, I said harvest, but a collection, or when it's ready to be used, like you were saying, Lauren, you don't always know until the land produces it. So if we find that something is not meeting the testing that we need, we still have enough diversity of sources and enough diversity of types of flowers that we're using that we can balance it out to maintain the consistency.
I love that. Biodiversity in all ways, diversity and biodiversity. So we have one more question from Hannah. Thanks for participating, Hannah. We appreciate you. And I'm going to send it over to Julian. And then after this one question, I think I'm just going to give us a couple of moments to wrap up, because I do have one question that I would love for our panel to answer, for all of you guys who are sort of in this space trying to figure out how you're going to get materials either adopted within your business or get your company off the ground. So Julian, when you are using natural materials, and this is why I'm putting it over to you, because I think you guys have considered this already, that need space to grow, like trees or flowers or other things, are you simultaneously considering the impact on the natural ecosystem?
So short answer is yes, absolutely. We're considering the impact on the natural ecosystem. And the way we go about that is trying to surround ourselves with people who are experts around the very specific land which, you know, we're interested in working with as well. So typically that's local conservation groups who might even be helping manage a piece of land for sort of 10, 20 years or something, and have a really sort of deep knowledge of what's best for it and what's needed. So, and then it's also partnering with people like the Wildlife Trust or the RSPB, who are huge sort of conservation groups, and also large landowners as well as a result. But they understand migratory bird patterns and how, you know, nesting schedules and things like that, and bringing all of this information together. And as Christine made in a really excellent point on sort of ensuring that we have as much high quality data as we can, so we can make the most intentional, sensible decisions that we can for a specific environment. And also love the fact that, you know, Pangaia and Flower Down is diversifying the flowers as well, because it's always about how do you make your solution right, not for everywhere, not for all over the world, but for every specific location you're interested in. And it's only through that sort of holistic approach where I think we're all going to be able to make a really big difference as well.
Great point. Okay, so last question, because I didn't see any more in the chat. All of you have less than 2 sentences to fit this in, your response in. So think about it before you speak, because we only have 4 minutes left. So what is one piece of advice that you would give someone who has a game-changing product or material concept, but doesn't know how to get started? So I think a lot of you guys are at different, you know, points in sort of the innovation process, and taking your companies from concept to true commercialization. So I'd love to hear just a small word of wisdom from each of you. So Christine, you start us off, and then...
Yikes. Okay. I mean, I think talk to people, ask for help. You know, that's one of the biggest things you can do is develop your network around this. I think Fashion for Good is a great reference to go to if you're trying to start something in the sustainable fashion innovation space as well. And go for it. And if anyone says it can't be done, that all the more reason to do it, because those are the ideas. Those are the ideas that really make a difference.
Love that. Okay. Jeroen, how about you?
Yeah, similar. I mean, the first thing is learn about the whole supply chain from let's say whether it's farmland or wherever it starts to product, and learn everything in the middle. And believe, passion, don't give up. Believing is just the best thing you can do if you want to succeed with your product.
Thanks. Nicolas?
So I'm less holistic. I say apply for certainty, it must work, and exercise for future and experiment for future.
And Julian?
So I would say a specific piece of advice which someone gave us, which has been really, really helpful, is find a company or a startup which is about 2 to 3 years ahead of you in what they're doing, rather than someone who's 10 years or 15 years ahead of you, even if they're wildly more successful, because the people who are 3 years ahead of you, they've just done what you need to do right now. And I think that's by far the most valuable piece of advice we got.
That's really, really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Can you reveal to us who your mentor was?
Oh, who's our mentor? It's someone from Imperial College. He's called Guy Blasky, and he's a very, very lovely guy.
Interesting. Very cool. Well, I think that about does it for today. Thank you all panelists for imparting your wisdom upon us. Thank you for your time. I'm sure people from this session will be reaching out to you. So thanks again. And that's it.
Thank you, Laura.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thanks, Lauren.
Bye-bye. Ciao,
Bye,
ciao.
everyone.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone.
Thank you, everyone. That was great.
Good day, good evening. Bye-bye.
That was so good. I really, really enjoyed that. And as always, I just keep learning so much. I wanted to let everyone know now that it's time for a networking break. And I'm sorry if you're all hearing an echo. I'm not sure what's going on. But anyway, it's time for a networking break. And we have a speed networking session. You'll see that on the left-hand side of your screen. There is a chance. This is a chance to connect one-on-one with some of the other attendees online today. During the speed networking, attendees are automatically matched based on their interests. To access the speed networking, please click on the networking button on the left side of your screen. And in this networking room, you'll also see a list of recommended connections. So if you'd prefer to use this time to meet one-on-one with selected attendees, you can schedule these meetings here as well. Hope everyone finds who they're looking for. Thank you.